For Israel, make no mistake, this is a huge night, potentially the end of the nightmare. For the people of Gaza, this is going to be an enormous relief. For the people of Israel, potentially the end of a 2-year-long nightmare.
And for these families still waiting for the remaining hostages who are still alive to come home, this has been an agonizing wait. And of course, the families who will get the remains of loved ones who died while in captivity.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, huge breaking news. Did you trust the plan? Did you trust the plan, Patriots? Because President Trump has just announced that both Israel and Hamas have agreed to phase 1 of his Gaza Peace Plan, a proposal designed to bring about an end to what has now been a 2-year-long bloody conflict. And it's interesting because many people express their thoughts that this could never be done. To be honest, even I had those doubts in the back of my head. But ladies and gentlemen, this is why you always trust the plan. Because pro-Israel people said, you're never going to get Hamas to agree to anything. Pro-Palestine people said, you're never going to get Israel to agree. And ultimately, there's still a lot that has to be done, but the fact that phase 1 already has now happened within the span of days is undeniably massive and huge progress, and perhaps most importantly, this will indeed involve the returning of hostages and a withdrawal of Israeli troops from a certain point in the Gaza Strip. It is effectively, in a sense, something of a ceasefire. Hey, that's the hardest part. What comes next? I mean, we'll find out, ladies and gentlemen. But for all the people who said, oh, Trump is just going to keep on sponsoring Israel's war. Trump is not really anti-war. He's betraying all his promises of peace because it turns out global and international relations do not happen overnight. I think we're owed something of an apology here, and I think it ought to keep on going. But that said, guys, we'll tell you all about it. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is the best way to support our work and ensure that we can keep doing these videos. And that said, let us read you this breaking news statement from President Trump tonight, saying the following. I am very proud to announce that Israel and Hamas have both signed off on the first phase of our peace plan. And by the way, what does that involve? Well, this means that all of the hostages will be released very soon, and Israel will withdraw their troops to an agreed-upon line as the first steps towards a strong, durable, and everlasting peace. By the way, just to really briefly recap for you here, the aspects of the Gaza Peace Plan, it involves an immediate ceasefire, the release of hostages, that is phase 1. This is something that obviously, the Israeli government has said we obviously cannot keep on fighting the war so long as there are hostages. Well, as long as that now goes through, you will get that done. It also includes a partial Israeli withdrawal, right? The IDF is withdrawing now to a yellow line. This is a pre-agreed upon buffer zone that reduces the occupation from 80% of the Gaza Strip to now about 55% of the Gaza Strip. In phase 2, that will be 40%. So in a sense, there is something for kind of both sides here to be happy about, right? The pro-Israel side can say we got our hostages back. The pro-Palestine side can say, okay, well, we don't want Israel to occupy Gaza, but here they are moving back a little bit. Of course, some people are still going to go out and try to say whatever they will about President Trump. It's the neocons like Mark Levin basically this entire time have been saying he's not being aggressive enough when it comes to the Middle East. The pro-Palestine people say he's the shill for Israel. And those of us who are like slightly less, I guess, radical or what's the word I'm looking for here? Fanatical. That's right. Simply understand that sometimes situations can be complicated, right? Trump, yes, has always been a very pro-Israel individual. At the same time, he has stated many times he wants his legacy to be a peacemaker. He obviously wants to win the Nobel Peace Prize. And so there's going to be that juggling of interests. And for people to not really get this or scream from the rooftops whenever, the intricacies of foreign policy are at work, well, I hope in this case, are you going to apologize? Are you the very least going to maybe sit back and relax a little bit, right? Let one of the best negotiators in the world do his work right now? I don't know. That said, let's go on here. A big aspect of this as well is that the peace plan involves no Hamas government, right? Hamas basically has to step down. They have to hand power over to some other authority. In this case, they're stating a temporary rule by a, quote, technocratic, apolitical Palestinian committee. And very interestingly, if I'm not mistaken, Hamas has already said they'd be fine with this. So, that's definitely big. Transitional government as well. This will involve like a board of peace. We're talking about humanitarian aid, reconstruction, attracting Middle Eastern investment, which is very important, right? Because I think ultimately it should be the other Arab countries who are going to have to rebuild Gaza, and in order to have some type of security guarantee so that this war just doesn't keep on happening again and again every 20 years, you're going to have to basically do, actually, as much as it was memed or made fun of, what Trump is talking about, right? Turn it into a, quote, modern miracle city. You can have some degree of like a security guarantee or even an annexation by Egypt or other Arab countries, and that ultimately, right, would be the best outcome if it is sustainable or possible here. But anyways, those security guarantees do indeed come up as well. Israel retains the right to defend itself, but commits to no reoccupation or annexation, which is another important point too, by the way, because I want people to understand just how impressive this accomplishment is by President Trump. Because you're talking, and by the way, the reason why a lot of people were skeptical, is it even possible for this peace plan to succeed, is you're trying to get two very diametrically opposed, obviously, entities with opposite interests. Let's start with Hamas, number one. Hamas is obviously what? An Islamic terror organization, basically posing as well as the local government. And much like Osama bin Laden, what is the ultimate goal of these terrorists? Well, contrary to maybe popular belief, it is not to win some type of conventional war against Israel or America. Rather, it is to basically drag Israel, knowing there would be a response after October 7th, right, into this international quagmire where they knew that the images, the videos, the propaganda they could create as a result of it would be shocking to a bunch of people. It's the same way Osama bin Laden's goal was never to win directly against the United States. Rather, it was to get the United States involved in these quagmire wars in the Middle East that ultimately would bankrupt and suffocate and kind of divide it apart politically. By the way, one could argue Osama was ultimately successful in those goals, right? But the reason I bring all of that up and kind of represent that motive is to say, well, even though they may be the de facto local government of the Gaza Strip, Hamas has no incentive to want to end the war. When you, at least in theory, because they're the crazy terrorists, again, want Israel to keep fighting, keep bombing, keep annexing parts of Gaza, so that way they can keep pointing to the rest of the world and say, hey, look at Israel, look, they're a terrorist state, look, they're really bad. Now on the flip side, Benjamin Netanyahu, someone who I have had perhaps controversial opinions about on the American right, but I've best described him as a neocon, right? I don't think he's been an entirely trustworthy person. I think that I gave Trump actually a lot of credit the few times he's pushed back against Netanyahu with some of that Iran stuff and other things, but it's important to understand as well on his side, right? That is no secret. One of his major goals, it's literally on his desk, right, Greater Israel, is that he wishes to expand some of the territorial borders of Israel. And, this guy has basically supported every major regime change war that America's fought in the Middle East for the past several decades. The reason I bring that up as well is because if you're talking about a neocon warmonger who's in charge of the government of Israel, then that's another entity who probably does not really have much incentive to stop the war other than to basically maybe try to improve Israel's international image by stopping the fighting, which maybe there's an argument to be made there. This is all to say, right, in a negotiation between Islamic terrorists and neocons, like mortal enemies for the past 40 years, the fact that you could get both of them at the table, truly, as the negotiator, as the peacemaker, major accomplishment by President Trump. And that's, again, why I say, whatever credit you think you're giving him for this, maybe he deserves a lot more. Because, you keep in mind who he had to talk to in that very room. That said, he goes on here to state that all parties will be treated fairly. This is a great day for the Arab and Muslim world, Israel, all surrounding nations, and the United States of America. And we thank the mediators from Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey who worked with us to make this historic and unprecedented event happen. Blessed are the peacemakers. Well, again, I say to the neocons who said, you're never going to be able to make a deal with Hamas. Oh, well, they just did. I say to the Palestine people, Trump's just going to give Netanyahu everything he wants. But he didn't. right? The deal says no annexation of Gaza. Israel has to withdraw, okay? The hostages have to be released immediately, which, by the way, if you want to make the super cynical argument, some have said that, oh, Netanyahu is kind of delaying on the hostage release so that way he can keep the war going. Well, guess what? That justification is no longer going to exist. So again, it's almost like Trump navigated a very complicated situation. It took a lot of time, and ultimately, in the end, he was successful because he's pretty good at foreign policy, right? People don't give a lot of credit to this. People look at other, factors, but perhaps one of the most underrated aspects of both Trump presidencies, frankly, is that very foreign policy. Now, that said, apparently it's interesting to also note how this news was broken. Earlier, Trump was handed by Secretary of State Marco Rubio during an event at the White House on Wednesday, right? Basically here, here's the video actually. So he was speaking live, right?
They deceive. A lot of them are crooked people. A lot of them have been staying out of trouble their whole lives, and they've been bad from the day they were born, frankly. But these are sick people. Pam, go ahead, please.
Well, they're smart, but they're not smart enough. Oh, my microphone's broken. They're smart, but they're not smart enough. They have been covered by these liberal cities for so many years. And that's why we're all working with Treasury, with all these different departments, to find the criminal conspiracy.
Okay. I'm just giving. I was just given a note by the Secretary of State saying that we're very close to a deal in the Middle East, and they're going to need me pretty quickly. So I will take a couple of more questions.
Yeah, so that's how it happened. Pretty cool, by the way. Now, after Trump invited him to sit at the table alongside other White House staff, Marco Rubio approached the president and whispered something in his ear. He then sat down and wrote a note, which he had passed on to the president. And according to the photograph of the note, it read, quote, "We need you to approve a Truth Social post as soon as you can announce the deal first. Or soon so you can announce the deal first, I should say." Trump had said an earlier delay in starting the event was caused by him dealing with people in the Middle East. So this was ongoing regarding talks over the 20-point proposal, which Hamas had partly accepted on Friday, just days after he unveiled it alongside Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu last week. There's the image, by the way. He's like, I did something, right? And Trump further said that the peace talks, which are being attended by representatives of Israel, Hamas, Egypt, and other Arab states, as well as Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, were very close to resulting in a deal sometime toward the end of the week, which he did. Right now we have the deal toward the end of the week, maybe in the middle of the week, you could argue. They both arrived in Egypt on Wednesday as Israel and Hamas exchanged lists of prisoners and hostages to be released as part of a potential agreement. Basically goes on there. Trump is also floating that he might be taking a trip to the Middle East here very soon. And essentially, guys, there you have it. So major news. Everyone should be happy, although I'd have to imagine that those who have been trying to either milk the situation and keep it going, or they don't want Trump to succeed, or their true motive maybe is not peace, but rather performative activism over this war, then that story might be a little different. For instance, I think of one person in particular who has recently been the subject of this, Greta Thunberg, who you may remember like a month or two ago, right? She took the tiny sailboat to Gaza, and then Israel basically blocked her from coming in because, after all, why are you trying to sail a sailboat through an active war zone for performative reasons? And what, the Israeli military is supposed to just like grant you access to do so? It's like, as I said, right? I'm kind of distrustful of Netanyahu. I'm not this blanket Israel defender or everything they've done throughout the course of this conflict. But that said, to the Palestine activists, what exactly do you expect sailing through an active war zone, right? But anyways, basically just this week, Greta Thunberg did that again. And this time, instead of being simply sent back home and deported, because she did this the second time, the first time you showed up, okay, it's not even your country, it's an active war zone in another country, and just demanded to be allowed in. And you were intercepted by the Navy and they sent you home. Very light response, by the way. The second time around, she was apparently arrested and held in jail for a few days as a result, and went on to claim that she's being subjected to harsh treatment in Israeli custody after her detention from her Gaza aid flotilla, basically claiming that she was being tortured, right? She told embassy staff that she is held in a cell infested with bed bugs with too little food and water and has developed rashes. She reported sitting for long periods on hard surfaces. Now, of course, this is the same Greta Thunberg who her entire life has been based on manufactured, basically fake performative activism. By the way, just a few weeks ago, if I remember correctly, they basically faked a drone strike on their boat that was sailing. They claimed it got hit by an Israeli drone. And the first thing I said is, okay, you're sailing in a freaking war zone. Like, you understand that's dangerous? But apparently that wasn't it at all. Apparently, like, their flare gun went off or something like that, because even the air control of other Arab states in the region basically said, no, there's no drone activity. We don't even know what you're talking about. And then now, of course, she's saying the same thing. Oh, it's a jail. So who knows if it was really infested with bed bugs. But of course, right, too little food or water. I don't know. You're getting jail food. You know, you're sitting on hard surfaces. Yeah, it's a jail. But anyways, there you have that. And then apparently, right, Greta Thunberg was released in a few days. You can see, right, this guy, Jackson Hinkle, total interesting character on X. He goes out to state that breaking news: Greta Thunberg is giving a speech in Greece after being abducted by Israel. And it's like, if she was abducted by Israel, how is she giving a speech in Greece? I don't understand. Make that make sense, right? These people are so performative. They're so dramatic about all of this. But, you know, okay, if you really care for a peace in Palestine, if that's really your agenda, and again, not like grifting off of something for performative activism, are you going to be thanking President Trump this week? You know, are you giving him credit? Because he actually did a big thing that you guys should want? Or are you basically now going to be saying, oh, what am I going to like scream about at the entire world for this time? I don't know. But here was her speech.
Okay, let me be very clear. There is a genocide going on in front of our very eyes. A live-streamed genocide on all of our phones. No one has the privilege to say we are not aware of what is happening. No one in the future will be able to say we did not know. Under international law, states have a legal obligation to act to prevent and to stop a genocide from happening.
Okay, that's what President Trump just did then. You know, if you're going to characterize it in that way. See, that's the difference between a performative grandstander named Greta Thunberg and a real leader of historical consequence named Donald Trump, who actually stepped in and did something about it, right? She's about to go on and scream for 5 minutes. What have you done for Palestine and the genocide and all this? And I think it's worth asking to Greta Thunberg, what have you done for Palestine? I took a tiny sailboat that had like a granola bar in it. I said I was bringing foreign aid to Gaza, and then they told me I couldn't just walk it freely into an active war zone. Okay, yeah, that's doing something. And then cry the victim when you do it twice, and the second time you get arrested because they repeatedly tell you not to do that. No, I don't think so. And then, by the way, they release you like 4 days later. You're in Greece claiming you got abducted, but you're literally just standing there. Yeah, not exactly the brightest tools in the shed. But you know, I'm like I said, I'm curious to find out what is their response to this going to be. You know, I can virtually guess that it's just going to be a bunch of bad faith screeching. Even though I thought this is what they wanted, right? I thought they wanted the war to stop. But apparently not. That said, guys, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.